Do we have this?
We should be live.
All right. Awesome.
You see
All right,
on the
everybody.
top it says it should give you the live what you call it, little button thing, and then show you the
Yeah.
views and all that good stuff.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I probably should have gotten another computer system, but everyone, for those of you that are in, what we're going to be doing here, and I probably shouldn't have gotten rid of my Discord. What we're going to be doing is we're going to start creating a series of videos that are kind of essential videos, right? So I've gone through and I've created a number of different, like PowerPoint presentations on essential topics in computer security that we're going to start doing videos for. And I thought instead of just doing the video and throwing it out in YouTube, I thought I would kind of crowdsource it a little bit. So let me open up Discord again and share with you all what it is that we're actually doing for that particular topic. So you can have some say in that topic. So we're all going to work together. I'm going to kind of show you what I was thinking about doing for essential core Nmap skills that people need to know. And then I'm going to do the video live, and it's going to share this entire mess out on Twitch with everybody. So I'm going to share this video live. And then what we're going to do is we're simply going to like edit it and then load it up on YouTube. So you'll be part of a bigger thing rather than just me saying, here's the stuff that I say upon high is necessary from the perspective of learning computer security. You'll actually be able to fit into it. And right now, I don't think I have a crazy number of people in as well. So we're doing all kinds of weird video stuff. I'm eventually going to have a second computer right here off to my left where we'll create it and then I can actually see your comments. But for right now, if you could do me a favor and just come into Discord. So right now it's Maxwell Smart and Data Epsilon. If you're in Discord, do a quick sound off. And this isn't going to be a dedicated time. This is just going to be a thing that I'm going to just kind of jump on people and we're going to work on it together and do these things together. And then at the end, I'm going to do the full recording of what it looks like, and then I'll be able to actually cut all of that out. So if you have any, White Cyberduck's here. Awesome. It's all the cool people. I think Hoax Paragon is here as well, also in Twitch. So yeah, we are in the, webcast live with the little robot knowledge sharing is what we're going to be doing. And like I said, I want this to be a little bit more interactive than just here's a video and what we do. So I've got some basic outlines of what we're going to do in the video. And I want to make sure that you're all okay with this. I'm going to talk like at a high level why to use Nmap. So this will be the first video that we're going to be doing. At a high level, why do we use Nmap? How do we get Nmap installed? I'm going to move on to like, what does a scan do whenever you're a root user or a standard user? I'll probably even talk a little bit. I don't know. Do you all think it's something that that's important for us to talk about? Like, you really should be using Nmap on Linux. It just works better. The TCP/IP stack seems to be better. I don't know if that's something I should be discussing. I'm going to show how to install it in both of them out there as well. And yes, I'm going to be talking about what the A scan is. I think I have that over here. Oh no, I don't. All right. So let's go ahead and let's add in the A scan. All right. So let's go ahead and let's add in the A scan because it's not that the A scan does the same thing as SynScan and like using scripts. It actually does a lot more than that. And really, if you're looking at the man pages, it's basically whatever Fyodor wants it to be. Yeah, Zenmap Sparks Flying is a front end for Nmap. So I was going to talk about that on the Windows side, kind of doing that and how that actually works as well. So there we go. And would you start with a brief idea of TCP and how Nmap works with it? Yeah, that sounds good. So we'll put that in here with the TCP and UDP port range, data epsilon. We can definitely talk about that. Let's go SYNACK, and we'll go through that. The Nmap flag using OS. Now you can look like a real lead hacker. I don't think we're going to get into the hacker as far as the output formats of it as well, especially whenever we're talking about it. But maybe we could. Let's just stick with the basics of it. So we got sins and acts. We're going to do Zenmap. We've got that. I don't know if timing. I think that timing is probably something that I think I'm going to cut, honestly. And the reason why is the only reason why you would be doing any timing is if you're getting into more advanced topics, for like the round trip, like timing associated with it. And I honestly don't use Nmap for like large scale scans across like thousands and thousands and thousands of IP addresses. You would end up using something like mass scan for that. Yeah, once you start getting even like T4, there you go. Maxwell just pointed out T4 just absolutely will start flipping out. And the thing that sucks, I think, the most about it is you'll start bringing down network segments. Um, we could do considerations. Don't get burnt. So we can talk about dash T, and we can talk about VPNs. Let's say, there we go. So we can do that. Or the NSA got a T6 option. I think, yeah, we'll definitely talk about mass scan a little bit more from that as well. All right. Are there any other things you think I'm missing? We got to be looking at this, everyone. We're looking at this from the perspective of somebody has no idea, like port scanning. They have no idea for Nmap. They have no idea about any of these things. And this is a video that literally gets them just started with it as well. What's the deal with scanning from a VM that's bridge? Sam schemes to get screwed up and scans the VM instead. I haven't seen that. That might be a setup on your side, Maxwell. I don't know. I'm actually running my VM through NAT, is what we're doing, and I'm probably just going to scan between the Windows system and the Linux system, kind of going back and forth because we're going to be like pimping out, of course, Antisyphon Training on that as well. We might. I actually for the netstat stuff, I think we're going to do netstat on Windows command line. And I know I've done a lot of videos on Windows command line, but it's been like part of a webcast or something like that instead of these types of videos and what we have. So what else? Show an application. Yeah, we can actually do that. I'm actually going to stand up Netcat listeners for that as well. Haven't been. Data Epsilon. Um, that's a good point. That's a good point. What do we got here? The top end ports, or what doesn't it scan? All right, that's a good point because there'll be people that'll be like, there'll be people like, why is it not seeing this port? Why is it not seeing this port? Why is it not seeing this port? And if we're looking at like the top end ports, I think understanding that it's only going to be scanning like the top default 1,000 ports is going to be important out there as well. So, yeah, always pet the net cat. I like that. So, what do we say? Is this a good start for someone like just getting started in security and things like that? All right. And I probably will not be all that interactive during the actual recording of it because it's just going to be me going through it like I was teaching a class. So we're kind of setting up what we want to discuss, what we think someone needs to know, and then I'll record it and we'll do it live basically. Yeah, we want to keep it really simple. Yeah, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at it like somebody doesn't know anything about Nmap. What is it that they need to know about Nmap? Yeah, we'll do it live. We'll do it live. All right. All right, folks. So if you could do me a favor, we got people that are joining and just jumping into the Discord server and they have no idea what the hell is going on. Can you please throw them over at the Twitch live stream and just kind of give them a quick overview of what it is that we are doing? Because this is what I want to do, especially with some of the core topics. Just really kind of looking at it. Really, sparks flying. We aren't talking about like blue team vulnerability or red team or anything like that. It's just you have no idea what Nmap is. You're just getting started. And like this whole entire thing, we're going to call it essential security. So essential security Nmap, essential security Wireshark, TCP dump, Sysmon. Like seriously, it's kind of like my intro class. I feel like I jump over some of these topics too quickly. and we get right to labs, and I'm really, really assuming that people have a core understanding of TCP/IP. They have a core understanding of Nmap. They have a core understanding of operating system command line, and I think that we're losing people on that. All right, so folks, let's go ahead and let's do this. I'm going to go to this particular screen to start. And then we're just going to kick it off. And if I screw up, we're just going to edit it out and we'll just go through that. So you guys will see what it's like whenever I'm creating videos on the fly. All right. So I'll see you on the other side. So just sit tight and we'll give it a little bit of a breakdown and we'll do it. All right. So you got to get into the mood, right? Shh. All right. All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is John Strand, and in this video, we're going to be spending a little bit of time talking about what kind of core essential Nmap skills that you need to have in a section that I like to call the essential Nmap section of essential security. Now, this particular video, as always with our videos, is brought to you by Black Hills Information Security. If you're interested, we do network penetration testing, we do incident response, we do SOC services, bunches, full scope security service shop. It is also brought to you by Antisyphon, Antisyphon Security Training. If you got this video and you kind of like it, you should probably check out our training. We are also the home of Pay What You Can training. All right, so with this is a little bit different than what I do in most of my videos, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started in this particular one. We're going to start by looking at why you should use Nmap and what is the installation of Nmap. So let's go ahead and let's start with the conversation. Why would you use Nmap? Well, if you're starting with computers at an absolute fundamental level, you need to understand ports and services. So between two computer systems, when they communicate, you're going to be sending packets back and forth between ports. Now, we aren't going to get into it too much here, but there's 65,536 ports times 2 on your systems for a protocol called TCP and another protocol called UDP. And Nmap allows us to remotely identify which of the ports are actually open on those remote computer systems. Now, that is incredibly powerful for you as a budding IT professional to try to identify if your services that you're trying to communicate are even up and running. One of the things you'll hear in the industry is it on, right? Like if you're having trouble with the computer system, are you sure it's turned on? This is kind of a way of saying, is the application you're trying to communicate with actually on and listening? So let's go ahead and let's spend a couple of seconds and let's jump into installation. The installation will actually be different for Linux and for Windows. So for that, I'm going to be using my handy dandy virtual machine that I use in my intro to security classes, intro to SOC core skills, intro to security, and intro to cyber deception. And I'm going to open up a terminal and we're going to run it as administrator. We got that running. Next, I'm going to drop down and open up an Ubuntu command prompt. And really, this is a Linux system, and I can zoom in for you all. This is a Linux computer system. I'm going to show you how to use it and install it on a Linux computer system and on a Windows computer system as well. On a Linux computer system, it's pretty easy. Most of the systems that you would use will have a package manager. In this example, I'm going to show you how to use it with APT. APT is just a package manager that springs from Debian-based computer systems. And most people that are just getting started, they feel really comfortable getting started with Ubuntu. And I became root to do this because anytime we're installing software, we need to become root. It asked for my password, and now I have this pound prompt, and that means I'm running as root. So now I can do apt-get install nmap, like so. And APT is going to go out and it's going to identify if I need anything to install Nmap. On my Linux computer system, it says I'm already at the newest version of Ubuntu. I'm running at 7.6 and 1 Ubuntu 5. And of course, these are all the packages that say they're not required. But usually you just go through the defaults with APT and it's going to install Nmap for you. Once it's installed, you type Nmap like so. And you can see some basic usage information on how Nmap works. Now, just for the record, this can be a little bit overwhelming, right? Like if you're going to spend some time looking at all of this stuff, it's crazy, right? Don't worry about this. We're going to get you to some really, really basic things that you can do with Nmap and get a tremendous amount of value out of it. There's a lot of stuff here for a lot of really, really advanced things that you can do with Nmap that don't really get used all that often in the industry as a whole. So that is how you install Nmap on a Linux computer system. On a Windows computer system, there's actually an installer file that you can download from Fyodor's website. So if I go to, I'll just keep my themes, start browsing. Thank you, Firefox, for allowing me to browse. And you just do a Google search for Nmap, right? And it's going to take you to insecure.org or nmap.org. So with nmap.org, you go right into it, gives you an overview. By the way, this website hasn't changed much in the past 20 years. It's crazy. And there's lots of good reference guides and things out there that you can play with and you can kind of learn about it and see that Nmap's been used in a number of different movies, which is pretty cool. But you want to go to the download section and you want to download for Windows. And then you can download the binary, right? So I'm going to download Nmap 793. And I actually have Nmap, but I'm going to reinstall it. Just for grins, for kids. A few seconds left. There we go. We now have it. Now I can open up the file, go through the Nmap installer. I agree to all of this. Sure. You don't have to worry too much about a lot of this stuff. There's actually, I'm going to zoom in and kind of run through some of the tools that it's actually installing. Nmap core files, just the stuff that's required for Nmap to actually run. Let me change and go to my full screen. Nmap core files are what's needed for Nmap to run. Register Nmap in the path. That means you can run it from the command prompt on a Windows computer system. The real magic that exists in Nmap, though, is actually the npcap drivers on Windows. These are the packet capture drivers that allows Nmap to basically sniff on the network adapter. By default, Windows doesn't make it easy. You can do some stuff with NetSH where you can do that, but this is a full driver that allows you to get more access to the TCP stack on a Windows computer system. Network performance, it's by default, network performance on Windows is kind of garbage. So especially when you're dealing with high speed scans with lots and lots of connections to tons of ports. Zenmap is a front end. I'm going to show you that here in just a little bit. We'll show you the GUI for it. NDiff allows you to do comparisons. This is important for you if you're running Nmap multiple times and you're checking for differences in your environment. This will allow you to do a difference. It'll say, these are the ports that were open on Monday. These are the ports that are open on Tuesday, and so on. NCAT is just like an implementation of Netcat. Interesting side note about Netcat. A lot of antivirus engines allow Netcat to run, and you can totally run NCAT as a full backdoor. And then nping is a tool that's like hping, an older version of the tool, hping and hping2. It allows you to do raw packet creation. And we can cover all of that a little bit later. We're going to install it to the Nmap directory. It's going to go through and install it. There we go. Screaming fast to get that installed. There we go. Now, this is interesting. The npcap driver, whenever you install it with Nmap, it always asks you like the license agreement as a GUI pop-up. If you want to buy a full commercial version, it comes with the ability for you to do like a quiet install. But the version that comes with Nmap, it totally is just going to ask you, hey, do you trust this agreement? So if you're ever trying to script the installation of Nmap on Windows computer systems, just by doing an install, you're always going to get the license agreement for the PCAP driver, because that's honestly one of the ways that Gordon makes money out there. Do we want to restrict it to administrators only? That's kind of a sniffer. I'm going to go ahead and just do that. Support raw 802.11. I'm not going to do that here, but this will allow you, if you have the npcap driver, to run tools like Wireshark and allow you to sniff raw wireless traffic. So whenever you're thinking about traffic, you look at ports and services. If you're sniffing traffic, a lot of times you're looking at like 802.2, and I'll get into that in a different video. that's out there. But 802.11 is really the wireless header. So it allows you to see what the wireless frames are actually doing. And as I said, it's not important for that right now. I just have it off. It's not that big of a deal. Install NPCAP and WinPCAP API compatibility mode. Absolutely. We want that. So Nmap works. Really, if you just keep the defaults work just fine for most everything that you're doing. So it's deleting all of the leftover files. We're getting the driver set up. So far, life is good. Starting up the driver, setting it up as a scheduled task. And now we're completed. All right, so we're going to finish it up. Installation complete. Yes, I want my icons. You got to have those icons. There we go. So now I've got it installed on Windows. Now, whenever you have it installed on Windows, it's actually installed in two different ways. All right, so it's actually installed in two completely separate different ways. The first way is you have the Zenmap GUI, right? So I can double click the Zenmap GUI and we'll come back to this here in a second. And if you want to use Zenmap, you're absolutely going to have people online that'll give you a hard time and they'll be like, oh, well, that's just lame. You don't want to use the GUI. Look, if you're just getting started, damn it, use the GUI. I really like the GUI for Nmap. And one of the things I like about the GUI with Nmap is it gives you the command and then you can basically copy and paste that command into a command prompt. So that's one way that it's installed on Windows. The other way that it's installed on Windows is from the raw command prompt. So now I can run Nmap and really a lot of the exact same options that I get on my Linux system are the same options that I'm getting on my Windows computer system as well. So that's just a quick overview of Nmap and like how to get it, how to get it installed and how to get it running very quickly on your computer system. So next up, what do we got? Default $ scans, and pound scans. Now, this is actually pretty important. And the reason why this is pretty important is at its core, aside from the GUIs, Nmap can run in two different ways. So let me zoom back in here on my Linux computer system. If I'm running Nmap as root, it's going to do something called a SYN scan or a stealth scan. Some people call it a quick scan. And what that basically does is it will send a series of packets to a computer system. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to open up a Netcat listener here. And this is just listening on port 2222. So not a lot of crazy shenanigans going on. But I'm going to split the tab and I'm going to run a sniffer at the exact same time as we do this. All right. So I'm going to run TCP dump. And I'm going to give it the interface is going to be my local loopback. And don't worry about this. Like I'm just running a sniffer, right? So if you're freaking out, don't. I'm just going to use this to articulate the differences in the way that Nmap runs. So now I've got Nmap running, I've got my TCP dump running. I have my port listener running on my Linux computer system. Now I'm going to do a quick Nmap scan and I'm going to specify the port. All right. So the port of my Netcat listener, and it's just a port listener. It doesn't do anything, but it's listening on port 2222. And I'm going to scan 127.0.0.1. And that is scanning myself. On every computer in the entire world, 127.0.0.1 is home. So if you see geeks wearing shirts that say there's no place like 127.0.0.1, that is basically a shirt that says there's no place like home. Whether you're a Linux system or a Windows computer system, 127.0.0.1 is a way that your computer can talk with itself. So I've set up a simple port listener on port 2222. It's just imagine you have 65,536 rooms. These are the ports, the pathways into your computer system. And I just open up a door, just listening on a port. It's not running a command prompt, can't hack it. It's just a port listener. And now I'm going to scan that particular port and it comes back and it says it's open. So you can see over here that we have three packets that were sent, right? The first packet that was sent was a SYN packet, okay? The next packet was a SYN ACK from myself responding. So Nmap will send a SYN packet to that port. It's like knocking on that particular port. It's like, hey, is this port open? And that port is in fact open. So my computer system responds back with a SYN ACK. So we have a SYN flag here, but this one you can see that we have a SYN and we have an ACK right there. And then Nmap immediately responds back with a reset. And it's just a way to kill that connection. All right. So with the SYN scan running as root, it sent 3 packets. Okay. It sent 3 packets. So I'm going to kill that and restart it. And what we're going to do is I'm going to kill my TCP dump. Remember, there was 3 packets. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and rerun TCP dump. And now we're going to run Nmap as not root, as a standard user. Okay. So we're going to go Nmap. We're going to give it a port 2222 127.0.0.1 like so. Now it says that port is closed, which I forgot to hit enter here. Hold on. Never mind the man behind the curtain. Let's rerun this. All right. So now I actually do have my port listener running. I forgot to hit enter. And now what we're going to do is we are going to rescan that port again. It says that port is open. But now whenever we're looking at Nmap, you can see that we got a few more packets, right? We sent the SYN packet. We've got the SYN ACK packet. And then we've got a series of ACK packets that basically went for it. And then we got the reset at the end. So if we look at the total number of packets in this example, it actually said it received 20 packets. Technically, it should only be 4. So it was sending some data back and forth. But realistically, it's just going to just send a few more packets per port than it is going to send when you're doing just a SYN scan. So if you're running as root, you're going to send fewer packets than if you're running as not root. Why? Well, when Nmap is running as root, it basically hooks into the operating system at a lower level so it can generate its own packets. We call this raw TCP socket access. Whenever you're running Nmap as a non-root user, it's using the standard operating system calls to make those connections. So does that mean that running it as root is always faster? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It is true that sometimes running as a full connect scan is what we call it, is when running as a not root user, is actually faster. And the reason why is it's getting responses back from the operating systems a lot quicker in those situations. So don't be surprised if it is actually a faster scan. All right. All right. So that is the difference between root and not root. What do we have for another topic? Let's talk about port ranges. Right. So as I mentioned, on your computer system, you have 65,536 ports for TCP and 65,536 ports for UDP. That's just kind of the way it works. And that has to do with when your computer is assigning ports, there's 16 bits, so 16 ones and zeros that reference what port is being used. And if you have 16 bits, then there's 65,536 possible values, because 0 is a possible value as well. So with Nmap, we can specify that port range. All right. And you already saw me do this a little bit with like the P option. All right. So let's go ahead and let's jump back and let's rerun our scan, but let's add in a few more ports on that. So let's go ahead. Let's go to that, switch to this. All right. So we already did it with port 2222. So I can listen on port 2222, and I'm not going to run my TCP dump anymore like that. Let's just kill that. And I'm also going to open up a listener over here with another netcat listener on port, let's say 2223. All right. Not that. There we go. 2223. So now in Nmap, I can give it a range of ports. And let me become root again. Like that. And make sure I hit enter on both of them. I did not. There we go. So we hit enter on this one. We hit enter on that one. So now if I want to scan that range, I can go Nmap, and now I can say scan ports 2222 and 2223 like that. And it's going to scan that range. And you see that it only has those 2 ports open. So now I can go a little bit deeper, and I can say, well, I want you to go 2222 to 2230. And it's going to show those 2 ports as open, but it's also going to show the other ports as closed. All right. It's going to show those other ports as closed. I can add in the -- reason flag like that, and it'll tell me why it thinks that those ports are open and closed. So this one says this port is open because I received a SYN ACK. It means it got a response. It got an acknowledgement to its initialization sequence request packet that was sent. So we got acknowledgement on those 2 ports. The rest of these ports came back as closed because it received a reset value. It received a reset value from those computer systems, or from those ports on those computer systems. So that is how we can specify a port range of what we want to look at for ports on computer systems. All right, what else do we have here? Let's go ahead and let's delete that. Let's talk about IP ranges. So a really, really basic way to do IP range is you can use the dash again. You can also use commas as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to run an Nmap scan and we'll give it a range. And this time we're going to run a scan against Google because I want to talk about a little bit about the legalities of how this stuff actually works, because a lot of people get worked up about is it legal to scan the internet? And it turns out it is. The only thing that you're doing is you're identifying whether or not a specific service is listening on a specific system. And by the very nature of those services existing, we're just seeing if they're open and they're listening. So it's like you have a whole bunch of ports or doors that are open. We're just merely going through and we're knocking on those doors for a standard port scan. Of course, I'm not an attorney, even though I've been doing this for 22 years. But generally, by and large, you're not going to get into trouble by doing port scans. And I'll give you some examples on why I believe what I believe. Let's go ahead and let's do an IP range of systems. So I'm going to jump back to my virtual machine. And what I want to do is I want to scan some Google space. So I can do that in a couple of different ways, right? So I can go Nmap and I can give it a name like www.google.com, like that. And I'm just going to give it a single port. We're going to go -P80. I don't want to scan too much on Google because Google might shun me. And it's saying that, port 80 is filtered. Okay, let's go 443, like that. And it comes back and it says it's filtered. Why it's saying it's filtered, I have no idea. But now let's go ahead and let's just do a full scan against 8.8.8.8. And Nmap will work just fine if you run Nmap and you run it against an IP address. It's going to scan the top 1,000 ports by default. And while Nmap's running, if you're curious as far as let me change my screen. If you're curious about what Nmap is actually doing, you can hit the space bar and it's going to tell you what it's doing. So it says, I have finished no hosts. One host is up. And currently that one host is undergoing a SYN stealth scan. And it says it's about 82% done, 87. It's got 4 seconds remaining. It's just getting slower and slower and slower on those computer systems, right? So probably shouldn't have chose to scan Google, right? So we can do that, 90%, right? Wait for it. And I can actually kick off another scan against my Windows computer system, so we're not dead in the water. So I can get the IP address of my Windows computer system, like so. And my IP address is 172.18.112.1. And I can go back here and I can run Nmap and I can run it against my Windows system. And it's going to go a lot faster because that system is on the exact same network as the system that's actually running Nmap. So it's about 94% done. Takes a couple of seconds. Now it says SYN stealth scan. Don't think that it's stealthy. The SYN stealth scan was something that came out and was named years and years and years ago because it wasn't completing the TCP/IP handshake. So people would call it a stealth scan. And it isn't. IDS systems, IPS systems, and firewalls will totally pick up on it these days. All right, so let's go ahead and just go to full screen. So with this, you can see that on my Windows computer system, I have port 80 is open, 135, 139, 445. All of these ports are open on my Windows computer system. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're all hackable. I want to make that abundantly clear. It just means there's ports open. We can get into a little bit more detail with service identification scans here in a little bit, but that's just scanning a single IP address, right? So when we finished up our Nmap scan of Google, it came back and it said, okay, port 53 is open because that's Google's DNS server. And then we have port 443 is open as well because that would redirect us to Google if you actually try to serve to 8.8.8. So I can go and I can give it a range, and I can go 8.8.8.8 and 8.8.8.9. And now it's going to scan that range. I must have screwed up on this. There you go. You can do a comma, 8.8.8.9. 9, like that. There we go. What? Why is it trying to resolve? Oops, stop that. There we go. Did I mess up on my range? Huh, it's weird. Okay. But you can also specify a star or wildcard character, and that will give you the range for the /24 for the classless interdomain routing of that particular IP address range. Or we can do it this way. We can do .0/24. Like that is another way to actually specify that CIDR range for that scan. And I'm not going to go through and scan all of Google for the specific range that it's actually going for on that. All right. So that is how you can identify ranges. And you can see one of the other videos where we're talking about TCP/IP, and we'll talk about CIDR. But basically, think about your IP address as like 8.8.8.0. And what that means is it's going to scan 8.8.8.0 through 8.8.8.255. So it's going to scan that entire range of systems that you specify there as well. All right. So we've got that talking about how we can specify ranges. Let's go ahead and let's go through. Let's talk about top ports. So by default, Nmap is going to scan the like top N ports, and by default, I think it's 1,000 ports is what it's going to scan. And the reason why is it's got to speed itself up. You don't want it to scan, you don't want it to scan like I don't know, all 65,536 ports. Now, if you're scanning for something like PCI, you absolutely do need to scan all TCP ports. That's actually a requirement. It's less of a requirement for UDP. And the reason why it's less of a requirement for UDP is UDP scanning really doesn't work against most UDP services. Like there is no concept of state where I send you a SYN packet in UDP. That's not even a thing. Most of the different services that exist in UDP require you to respond back or send some application specific protocol payload data. So if I'm trying to talk to something like DNS that's going to resolve my name, yahoo.com, to an IP address, it actually requires that to look and feel like a UDP packet. So it has to have some payload to trigger that particular service. And when you're running these Nmap scans, we'll talk about -A here in just a little bit. You're going to see that it's going to scan some TCP and some UDP ports as well. So if I were to do top N ports with Nmap, like top 1 ports is probably going to be like port 80 or 443. So if I do top ports 1, top ports 10, it's going to give me a subset of those ports. Now, earlier I had mentioned that scanning with Nmap is not illegal. And I want to show you some examples of that and why I believe that to be the case. So if you look at Nmap and you look at something like Shodan, like so, if you look at Shodan, Shodan is literally scanning the entire internet all of the time. And they're grabbing banners constantly. So if I look at something like MongoDB, Shodan has already scanned a large number of these different systems and has identified Mongo database instances. So this is a company that makes their entire business off of doing port scanning and identifying ports and services of those computer systems. So that's relatively basic, right? So here's all the MongoDBs. They've already done port scans and they found 36,503 systems in China and 27,000. And they're doing a little bit more. They're grabbing not just the ports, but also the banners for those ports as well. And then there's other companies like Census, Census port scanning. Helps if I can spell, right? There we go. Census port scanning. You got census.io, and census.io is doing port scanning, but they're also, do you want to hear something wild? So they're actually doing things like port scanning, identifying service banners, and then they're actually identifying vulnerabilities for that as well. which is kind of crazy. All right. So if you're freaking out and you're like, I don't know if I can do a port scan because it might be illegal and you might get law enforcement showing up at your door. Yeah, you're probably going to be okay. You're probably going to be okay doing that type of thing. So if we run Nmap, let's actually go back to my virtual machine. Let's go back to my virtual machine and let's just run the top ports. So if I run my Nmap scan against my Windows computer system, kind of stick with that because it runs a little bit faster. We can run our Nmap scan. And let's say I'm going to run it against the top 5 ports against my Windows computer system. These are the top ports that it scanned. FTP, SSH, Telnet. It found port 80 is open and 443 is closed. Let me zoom in so you can see that a little bit better. So we've got those ports are open. If I kick it up to the top 10 ports, it's going to grab the top 10 ports. See, and it's not starting at port 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the top ports that Nmap has identified on the open internet, which is weird. It's listing them sequentially, right? So some of these you expect, but some of them are a little bit of a shock to me, right? Like if I'm looking at like FTP, is FTP really one of the top ports? That's interesting. That's interesting to me. I would expect it, of course, to be like 443 and port 80 would be some of the top ports. Possibly hasn't updated it in a while, but that allows us to actually run our scans faster to see if these top ports that you would expect to see running actually are running as well. So let's go ahead and let's kind of mix some stuff up here real quick. So a service scan is basically where we're trying to identify the versions of specific services. So for example, you can find out a port is open, right? You can say, well, that port is in fact open or closed, and then Nmap will tell you port 80, port 443 is open. But with a service scan, that service scan is actually going to query that service a little bit more to identify what service is running by doing banner grabbing. And I already showed you that a little bit with Shodan. It actually captures those banners. We can actually do something very similar with Nmap. So what I can do is I can scan my Windows computer system. We'll do top ports, but I'm going to do, instead of a like standard SYN scan, which is lowercase s, capital S, we're going to do a version identification scan against that system, just on the top 10 ports. Now these start to take a little bit more time, right? So now it's actually querying what that service is. And it's not just guessing because it's port 80, but it's giving us a little bit more details as far as what that particular port and service is. So you can see here, port 80 is open and it's actually Apache running HTTPD, and this is the specific version of Apache that's running. If you look at NetBIOS SSN on port 139, it says it's Microsoft Windows NetBIOS SSN. So now we're actually getting some solid information about what those services are, not just saying it's a web server. We're now being much more specific, and it's saying it is a web server that is running Apache, and it's running this specific version of Apache as well. So that's giving you a lot more useful information. This is really helpful, especially if you're doing something like scanning through a firewall. The firewall may be responding to you, but you're not actually talking to the service on the other side. So it may say the port's open. So doing a service scan sometimes will tell you if you have a device that is doing some level of filtering for you as well. So really just super duper useful to identify what those services are. All right. So let's go back to this. What do we got next? Service scan, Nmap scripting engine. I'm going to kind of combine these two together with the Nmap scripting engine and with the -a flag. The Nmap scripting engine allows you to do more in-depth scanning than you would get with just a standard port scan or even a service identification scan. You can actually have it query for specific things and maybe even look for vulnerabilities. For example, you could do Nmap on port 80 -- script invokes the scripting engine, and the specific script that you're executing, or the .nse script that you're executing on your computer system, is HTTP SQL injection on your particular computer system. Now I'm going to combine this with -a. And the reason why I'm combining this with -a is because it's weird. Let me just show you real quick. So let's go ahead and let's delete my arrows and let's go back here. And we're just going to do a quick thing. We're going to go like that. So these are a whole bunch of the NSE scripts that Nmap has, and you can invoke them by name. So you can do -- script, and you can invoke them by name. And there's a lot of scripts, right? And all the scripts on my system are stored in user share, right? So we've got method tamper, we've got open proxy, open redirects, checking for passwords that can be directly exposed through different ports and services with vulnerabilities. We can upload to VirusTotal the IP address that you're looking for. We can look for specific vulnerabilities. There is a lot of Nmap scripting engine scripts that you can run. And like right here, we got a whole category of them that are like Microsoft SQL, brute force, check the config, dump passwords, check for empty passwords. So really Nmap can actually be leveraged to the point where it is a full vulnerability assessment scanner on your computer system. But trying to run all of those is an incredible pain in the butt. So what we're going to do is we're going to run Nmap, but we're going to add Nmap, and we're going to do, instead of doing a version scan or a SYN scan, is we're going to do -a. Now, what does -a do? Well, to be honest, the short answer is if I do man Nmap like that, if I run man Nmap and I do a search for -a, go to the next one. Next one. Let me pull this up a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. Where is it? There we go. So he calls this an aggressive scan. And really what this scan does is a lot of things. It's basically whatever Fyodor wants it to be. So the aggressive scan is going to do operating system identification, which I'm going to talk about. It does version scanning. It does script scanning for some scripts, not all scripts, just a handful of scripts. In fact, while I'm talking about this, let's go ahead and let's kick that off. All right. So it's going to do some scripts. It's not going to execute every single one of them. And it does trace routing, finding the number of hops that exist between you and the system on the other side. Now, he said right here, more features may be added in the future. The point is just a comprehensive set of options that you can run without having to memorize all of the different options that you're actually looking for. So if you're getting started, you just want to throw an Nmap scan to get a good overview of what an IP address is and how an IP address actually works, this is the way that you would do it. To be honest, you can run a quick and dirty scan, just Nmap IP address, gives you an idea of what ports are on that particular computer system. But if you want a quick and dirty and comprehensive overview of what that system is and what that system does, then you can use the aggressive scan options, and it's done. All right. So we fired off the aggressive scan, which is everything in the kitchen sink. I only ran it against the top 10 ports just to save some time. It identified what ports are open, but notice what it did with the banner grabbing. All right. So it was still able to identify that it's an Apache HTTPD server, and the version is 2.4.25. It was able to identify that, and it's running on Debian, and it's going to say it's Debian even if it's Ubuntu. But then it also was able to look at the HTTP cookies. It was able to pull down the robots.txt. It was able to pull down the server header. It was able to see the login was for damn vulnerable Linux, and it's looking at login.php. All of these are scripts, all right? All of these are scripts. This is doing version scanning. These are the individual scripts that are executing. We ran the HTTP cookie script. We ran the HTTP robots.txt script. We ran the server header script, and we got the title script as well. That's awesome. Microsoft Data Services for NetBIOS SSN didn't get a lot out of it. Then we saw that, what was it? Oh, here we go. OS fingerprinting. And that's going to bring me here into a couple of seconds. We're going to talk about OS fingerprinting. We'll come back to that here in just 2 seconds. I want to talk about how that actually works as well. So that is basically looking at some core things for Nmap. Let me kill this, kill that. There we go. I like decoys as well. Decoys allow me to run a scan and make it look like it's blending in with other computer systems. And we can do this with the -D flag. And that's basically trying to create a smoke screen around your system, right? We're trying to create a smoke screen around your system. So let me show you decoys real quick. So if you ever want to do decoys in a scan, it's just the -D flag. So let's go over here to one of our other, I'm just going to create a new command prompt. That one's kind of getting ugly. There we go. So now I'm going to scan my Windows IP address again. Let me get the IP address of my Windows computer system like so. We're going to zoom in. I'm going to become root like so, like that. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to run our Nmap scan against our Windows computer system. But I'm going to specify a decoy of 8.8.8.8. This is literally going to spoof packets from 8.8.8 and intermix my packets with those. Once again, making it a little bit more difficult to try to identify who's running the scan. Now, of course, in this example, it's going to be really, really, really obvious because I'm the only system on this network. But if you're scanning from the open internet, it does help to kind of like mix things up a little bit, especially if you're looking at an organization that's trying to do some active filtering of these scans as well. So yeah, it's got like 6 seconds remaining. So we're scanning something and we're spoofing traffic coming from Google, which honestly what Google's doing is whenever the Windows system responds back to a SYN ACK to Google, Google's responding back with a reset. And it's setting its timing so it's not completely obvious that my system is the one that's running the scan. So it's basing its timing based on Google's responses, which I think is actually kind of cool on that. So it should be done here in just a second. Maybe. All right. So I might jump by this and we'll come back to it, but it's going to tell us what, there we are. So it basically said these are the ports that are open on this particular computer system, which we knew that already, but we just were able to specify some decoys in there. There we go. So now let's talk about operating system identification. Oops, let's go here. There we go. Now we're going to talk about OS identification, which we already have the data for OS identification. So let's go ahead and let's talk about OS identification. Here we are. All right. So in this one, we actually had the OS identification. And Nmap has a number of different variables that it checks to try to identify, well, what a particular operating system is. And there's 2 separate generations of OS identification, right? One of the OS identification is Gen 1, and that's basically how does it respond to very, very basic stimulus and response. Like if I send it a packet that has all of the different flags set, SYN, ACK, FIN, urge, push, that's called an Xmas scan. Different operating systems would handle that differently. If we're looking at if somebody sends a FIN or SYN and a reset flag at the exact same time, how does it handle that? And the reason why that works is whenever you're writing and coding your TCP/IP protocol stack for your operating system, it's totally just not going to be consistent across the board in how this is actually done. And that's actually kind of a big deal. And the reason why it's a big deal is that leeway in something that's called the RFCs allows for differentiation in how these operating systems respond. And this can even get down to specific service pack matches. So right here, it said no exact operating system match, just probably need to update it. But it basically is guessing that it's Windows, looking at it for service identification for NetBIOS. So we can get that from 2 different ways, right? We can get it from trying to identify the operating system fingerprint, but we can also get that from looking at the services and trying to identify those services as well. Now, if you're picking up on it, this is kind of fun. If you notice, it said that port 80 is open and it says it's running on Debian. And then down here, we got another service that's running and it says it's Microsoft Windows. Like, seriously, how the hell do we get the discrepancy? And the answer to that question is Docker. The version of Damn Vulnerable Web Application is running in a Docker container that's running a whole bunch of Debian stuff in the background. So that's how that type of thing actually happens as well. So if we're looking at operating system identification for Gen 2, it's actually looking at a lot more than just like how it responds to different flags, right? So whenever you're looking at it, here we go. Come on. 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 That's weird. Looks like it's broken. There we go. Remind me later. So whenever you look at Wireshark and you look at a packet capture, and you actually look at the TCP/IP header information. Let me zoom in over here. When you're looking at things like not source destinations, go to IP for identification flags. How is IP ID utilized? Different operating systems will use IP ID different. Some of them will increment IP ID by a predictable number. Some will set it to 0 unless explicit fragmentation is requested. It's like some Linux systems, but it's handled differently, right? If you're looking at it like what are some other things like window size, right? If you look at window size, different operating systems will set different window size values right here. What is the window size for this particular operating system? So Nmap will look a little bit, it'll look a little bit deeper. In fact, some of what it does, it'll actually look at the like mathematical prime numbers associated with sequence numbers. Crazy stuff. But different operating systems will randomize their sequence numbers. And in randomizing those sequence numbers, they randomize differently. Like they'll have different prime numbers associated with it. And Nmap is able to actually look at those sequence numbers. And based on those sequence numbers, it can make a rough guess insofar as what the operating system actually is. And I just think that that's just super cool. All right. So let's go ahead and let's take a little look at Zenmap. And then I'm going to get into a couple of recommendations that I give as well. So I'm going to get my Linux IP address here, like that. And I'm going to do a scan against my Linux system, but we're going to do it in Zenmap, right? We're going to do it in Zenmap. And Zenmap is a GUI that you can provide all kinds of different things for, but it always builds the operating system. Sorry, it always builds the command line for you, right? So if you look at the dropdown, you have IntentScan, IntentScan plus UDP, no pinging. If I do that, you can see it changes the actual command line invocation. Just a regular scan, that's just straight IP address. A slow comprehensive scan. Wow, look at those options, right? So we can do all of these different types of options against that IP address. And when I hit scan, it's going to, once again, I haven't accessed the helper scripts yet because I just installed it. And it's giving us a lot of the exact same operating system, the exact same types of things that we would see if we ran it from the command line, right? So here's our scan. It just ran against our Linux computer system. Didn't find anything all that interesting, right? But then you got options for output, like what are the services that are running? What is the topology? It'll try to map it. So if you're scanning a lot of computer systems, it'll show you the topology for how these different systems lay out. What are the host details for each of the different systems? And honestly, as much as people like that are kind of jackasses rip on it, it's actually pretty cool, right? And you can even save your scan output, right? So I can save that scan. So if you get something that you like with it as well, it just works. So honestly, if you're getting started with Nmap, seriously, you should totally be using the GUI if you're just getting started. And it works the same in Windows as it does in Linux. So there's no real big difference between the two. But it's got some cool stuff. It's got some really cool stuff. So check it out. All right. So now let's go back to our outline. And I want to kind of give you a couple of considerations on Nmap. And I want to specifically talk about timing. So a couple of things that'll burn you with Nmap. One is the timing, the capital T. Once you start getting to like T4 and you start getting into a more aggressive scan, Nmap's going to send packets a lot faster. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to lead to a full DDoS of that particular computer system. But it does mean that you're going to be sending more packets. And usually what's going to happen is you're going to end up dropping packets, especially if you're running from a Windows computer system down a VPN. In fact, I don't ever recommend you run Nmap through a VPN ever. And the reason why is the VPN will have limited bandwidth of what you can send through. And you're going to end up dropping packets. You're going to end up missing things. Or if you do decide that you're going to run an Nmap scan, keep it really basic and keep it open to just a handful of the different ports that you're going to scan with that. So it's just another way that you can actually look at it and try to do better when you're running your scans. Because this is good. This burnt me, right? When I was younger and doing this stuff, this absolutely burnt me back in the day. where I was running full scans on computer systems, and I was trying to run it through a VPN and getting really, really, really inconsistent, really getting some super inconsistent results from my scans as well. So hopefully this serves as a really good primer for Nmap. That's all that we have. And if you like this, you should subscribe. I know that there's like this thing, you got to subscribe to YouTube channels and things like that. So check out, like, and subscribe because we want to do more stuff like this for helping out the community. And I hope that you enjoyed it. So thank you so much. And we are out. So there we go. Let me stop sharing my screen. Woo! All right. So hopefully you all like that. Um, I like I said, we really, really, really want to start doing more of these. We're going to see how this actually worked. I'm sure that there's going to be some growing pains with this as well, but we're really just trying to help people out getting started with these types of things. So thank you so much, and also, if you have ideas, you can like DM me on Twitter or just mention it on Twitter. I would say you could send it to me on Discord, but Discord, you saw my Discord, right? Like my Discord is a hot nightmare, and I'm trying to be better about those things as well. So we're going to do that. Hoax Paragon was asking, so we'll open it up to questions for people now. Are we ever going to redo some of the videos on my personal channel? Actually, yes. I'm going to be redoing and deleting a lot of those different tools. Like I did it for Wireshark and TCP dump, and it really wasn't all that good out there at all. Right. And then we'll do Wireshark and some of those. But we're really going to focus on the basics and the fundamentals and the core of what it takes to learn these things as well. So what other questions do we have? Teach us about the Christmas scan so you can pass the CEH. So the idea was years ago, whenever they were coming up with these scan profiles, is operating systems were set up in such a way that they were basically coded to handle certain things, right? So it would receive a SYN packet and then it would respond with SYNAC, and they coded it exactly as it should handle it. But then what happened is if you sent a packet to a system that was starting a scan, resetting a scan, and acknowledging all at the exact same time, how would that operating system handle it? Some operating systems would just respond back with a SYNAC because they were only looking at the SYN flag. So when they were coded, if the SYN flag is set, respond back with SYNAC if that port is open. Others would drop the session quietly because it would receive a reset. Other operating systems, some really weird, like Unix-based operating systems, would actually seize the entire TCP/IP protocol stack. So the idea of a Christmas scan was more to identify the remote operating system and also to get by firewalls. Because a lot of firewalls, if you sent in a SYN packet and it was going to a port that was blocked, but maybe open on the system on the other side, if you sent a SYN packet, it would block it. But if you did like a SYN, FIN, URG, FUD, like Xmas scan, where you'd have all these flags set at the same time, the firewall would be like, well, it's got a SYN and an ACK flag set. That's part of an existing stream. Allow it through. Now that's worthless for finding out if a port's open, but the system on the other side would respond back most likely with a reset on that as well. There you go. Lit up like a Christmas tree. What do we got? I hope that my videos turned out okay. Nice. That potato you were using was all right, but you have HD tomatoes now. That's good. Don't delete the old videos. There we go. Don't delete them. Maybe we'll keep them up. All right. So any other questions before we wrap this up, folks? All right. So I want to say thank you so much. And this is not going to be on Friday. This is not going to be on Thursday. This is just going to be whenever I feel like it. And we're going to try to knock these out a little bit faster. And part of the reason why we're going to be knocking these out a little bit faster is the IT industry is bleeding right now. There's just a tremendous amount of people that are losing their jobs. And we have the intro classes that we're teaching and we're doing those types of things, but we're going to try our best to get people set up. By the way, this will be up on Twitch for very, very short period of time. And then I'm going to take it, cut it, edit it, and do some things with it here. And then I'm going to post like the finished product on YouTube. So I want this to be something that's more or less special for the people that are on our Discord server and the people that are part of our community that just as my way to recognize and say thank you to you all, because you are also a huge part of our community and you're very welcoming and helping people out to the community. And it's just kind of a way that I can reach out, get your feedback as well. So at the beginning of this, we said, here's what I want to cover. And what we're going to do is just continue to do that. So we're going to get the feedback from the BHIS Discord server, and you'll tell me what you want me to talk about. And some of the stuff we'll have to edit like on the fly and go through it. But I just want to say thank you. And you all rock. And I hope that you continue to go out and help out other people. So let's end the stream. Thank you so much, everyone.